When I first got into D&D, it was around the boom of D&D, just over 10 years ago. That makes me feel very old. It was the end of 2015 when Critical Role was launching and it was taking the world by this cataclysmic tsunami. I was in a small group where they wanted to play D&D, but we didn't have a DM, so I became the sucker. I got all the books, I researched as much as I could, and I was under the impression that DMs had weeks and months and years of planning before they started to become a DM. And I fell into this like honeypot, and for my first session, I spent an entire month planning the session. All the locations, all the enemies, all the NPCs, all the boss designs, loot, everything. It was homebrewed start to finish. So when everyone had their player characters made and we sat down to play, the very first thing that my players did was go up to an NPC that I had lovingly crafted called Jeremy Stillwater, and I heard the words, I roll to hit, followed by, oh, that's a natural 20. So within the first 20 minutes, poor Jeremy Stillwater was dismembered all over the pavement, and I had to think on my feet, great, now what do I do? Because Jeremy Stillwater was going to be like their town guide, he was going to help them out. So I had to think on my feet, and I had to improvise. If this even sounds remotely familiar, where you've been sat behind the DM screen thinking, now what do I do? This video is for you, or if it's going to help you prepare for the unpreparable. That's probably not even a sentence. However, after 10 years of being a DM, I've learned that improvisation isn't some magical talent that you're born with, it's a skill that anyone can learn. So this isn't going to be some super formal chat, this is just going to be one DM to another, or someone who's maybe a bit anxious about being a DM, and to try and give you that confidence for the things that you can't prepare for. So please, if you're feeling extremely nervous, just grab a glass of water, take a deep breath, and let's just go over quickly 10 things that I think are going to really, really help you being a DM. The first thing I want to go over is that improvisation isn't magic. I know I said this earlier, improvisation is a skill. A lot of DMs think in their head, and a lot of players think a lot of DMs have just created this meticulous world with 700 pages and a 1 million page PowerPoint and a guide of what to have. That this isn't the case. Every single world I've ever made is homebrew. So yes, I've had to have some form of planning, but it is far less than you would ever think. I just needed a few towns, maybe a city, and 5 NPCs. 5 NPCs is enough to get you through the door, no matter how big or small your world is. Because in reality, most improv, for me anyway, is just connecting things that already exist, and then post-session, just reminding myself of what they're connected so I don't get tripped up in a spider web. Quick example. Let's say the players go to a town called Sholem, the one I mentioned earlier. They meet a character called Vitonica. She is a tall high elf, dexterous rogue. They get to meet her, and I have a few notes of what I think she's like, and maybe I just add some details while they're talking to her, if they talk to her. Maybe in the next session, they go to another town called Vern, and they meet another character that I made. Let's say poor Jeremy Stillwater didn't die. And they talk to Jeremy, and they really like Jeremy, and you gauge the reaction of the players. You're like, oh, they kind of like Vitonica, and they kind of like Jeremy, and they're a little bit different. You are not creating nothing from just thin air. You are connecting some dots that you think could be fun, and then you are basically mediating those notes post-session. You are building from what's already there. So then you could maybe in session 3, or maybe towards the end of session 2, there could be some beef between Jeremy Stillwater and Vitonica, and then the players, they need to decide who to side with. Maybe they want to bring them together, and then maybe they get some quests and some rewards down the line from them. Does this make sense? We're going on to the second point. The second point is probably my favourite thing to do, but you have to be very careful how you do it, and it just comes with experience. And it's just that the players can't see your notes. And once this really sinks in, it is one of the most liberating feelings in the world. Players have no idea what was and wasn't planned for the session. Maybe Vitonica, this high elf that I've just been coming up with, I invented her 10 seconds ago. When I said you only need 5 NPCs for a session, you might on the spot think Vitonica could really work well with a sister. The hardest part is just coming up with a name on the spot. So let's just say Vitonica's sister's called Null, and you can figure out the details later. Maybe the NPC isn't wanting to reveal their name. So you just build these little details as you go on, and the part where they can't see your notes being so incredible and so, again, it's hard to stress just how freeing this is. Let's say the players are looking for someone who stole something from a town, and they're talking to these NPCs, and the NPCs might give their opinion. Vitonica might say, oh, well, I think it was taken to Vern, and then people in Vern say, oh, maybe people in Sholem took it. The part where your notes cannot be seen is the best part, is that you can decide whenever. I honestly feel that non-linear storytelling and haphazard kind of just pivoting makes for more breathable and engaging worlds. I don't even know sometimes at the start of a session who has stolen the artifact. For all I know, it could be Jeremy or Vitonica. I'm just going to gauge little pieces as we go on. Now, again, this is a bit like playing with fire, because you don't want it to be too random, so major events do need some setup, but this is how you just keep the world feeling like less restrictive as you're breathing and exploring it. Which brings us on to point 3 quite nicely. You do not need an answer for absolutely everything. As I was saying, you just need enough information to get the ball rolling. Everything can just naturally develop from there. When I was saying about making characters, you only need their baseline stuff. I say like race, class, maybe a goal, maybe a quirk. And if the character proves to be quite integral to the campaign, and like this is more for the homebrew side, but it's still relevant, you add as you go along. You don't prepare this like entire memory stem from the very beginning, like their character's loves and the character's desires, because they might end up like Jeremy Stillwater. You might spend hours planning this character from top to finish just for them to be dismembered within 10 minutes. So keep them simple, keep them adaptable, and you can adapt them on the fly, kind of like how I was saying with connecting the dots. You can just add these things as they go along, and the players can't see your notes, so they will think that this is some sort of mental stack that has been prepared in advance, when really you're just rolling with the punches. Being a DM is as much problem solving as it is creativity, because you need to make this feel natural, breathable, and as less restrictive as possible. This brings us very nicely onto the next point that I want to talk about, which is preparing NPCs and characters, not plots. What do I mean by that? A lot of your plot, for the most part, will sometimes revolve around a villain or a villainess or a hero or a heroine. So you want to prepare that character as loosely, but simultaneously as detailed as possible. A character that was in my D&D for over 10 years was Lolth. There was a homebrewed version of Lolth, and there was always 3 questions I asked when it came to that character. 1, what does she want? What does she stand to gain from this? Number 2, why does she want it? Like, what is her goal behind obtaining this? And number 3, and this is the most important thing, what happens if nobody stops her? Now, you don't need to explain those 3 points to your players, because as we were talking earlier about connecting the dots, maybe NPCs of your choosing can have bits of information that will help the players come along. Maybe they are withholding information, maybe they're pretending to know information. But the more you prep these characters, the more it will help them feel, which is the most important word, is believable. So let's take Vitonica yet again. What does she want? Why does she want it? And what happens if nobody stops her from getting it? This can be as simple as a train ticket. And I'm not joking, it can be as that simple. And this just makes them feel more natural, less like an MMO NPC that they randomly go into and just stop talking when not addressed. It is a living, breathing world where those 3 dots alone can just give a character so much more flavour than them just existing. This brings us on to point 5, which is let players help build the world. What do I mean by that? So before I start any D&D, I like to give my players a bit of a world map, and maybe some towns, some locations, an extremely high overview. Merchant town, harbour town, rich town. And ask them questions. Ask them to try and be as detailed as possible. Say, do you know anybody in this town? And if a player, they might go, how would I know anybody in the town? I don't know any of your NPCs. You don't need that. You just need them to say, maybe 1 or 2, yes or no. And you can just make up some characters. You don't even need to give the characters any details. You just, John, Jane, and Peter. Let's just take those as examples and just say to them, you know these characters. How much do you know about them? Just give them maybe a high-level overview, extremely high-level overview, and maybe an acquaintance, best friends. Again, this is just information that you can extrapolate from them and try and be as detailed as possible. Then, moving forward, you can just connect them into the story somehow. They can randomly show up. They can be some piece of the puzzle that they have been missing, and they might not know everything about this person because they just know them in the town. This can be exaggerated onto rumours, and sometimes players can kind of headcanon their own ideas, which might be better than yours, and you can just, don't tell my players that I've ever done this, but you can just steal them. They can say to themselves, well, maybe Peter in this town that I was in, maybe he had something to do with this. And you go, that sounds really cool. You know what? Maybe Peter did have something to do with it. And this brings us on to the next point, which I'm not trying to oversell. It's probably one of the most important points, and it will make you seem far more experienced as a DM than you probably actually are, myself included, and that is reuse everything. Absolutely everything. So this goes from items, random merchants, throwaway quests ideas that you've come up with, bring them all back. Let's say you prepared 6 NPCs for Sholem, but they only met 2 of them. Those NPCs don't have to live there. Back to the idea of that they have never seen what is on your notes. You just move them around. It's about having a never-ending treasure chest of ideas, items, and characters that almost like a sandbox, which is what D&D is, and that is the luxury of having a homebrew. You can just drop and place them anywhere. Let's say the characters were supposed to bump into Vitonica in Sholem. Let's say they never met Vitonica in Sholem because they didn't go to this specific place that you had designed. Just have them bump into a Himvern. It's not going to ruin the entire story. Or you can just have them, think, oh wow, this is a much better idea for Jeremy Stillwater rather than Vitonica. They're now meeting Jeremy Stillwater. And this is very important. The reusing aspect is going to be priceless, especially if they met the tavern owner of someone in Sholem, and then later in the story, you used those 3 points I was on about, and the tavern owner wasn't just a tavern owner, he was a very renowned adventurer, and he comes back and he helps them later in the quest. They will probably remember that guy, and they will bring that experience forward. Again, world building that is a gradual, slow roll rather than a 1,000-page document that you feel like you have to prepare. This may be a little bit different to the other points, but I'm just going to quickly add this one in because I feel like it is still equally as important. Whenever I've had a job interview, there's times where they will ask me a question and I won't say anything. And if they say, "Are you okay?" I just say, "Just give me a second to think." That is just as fine in D&D. You don't need to rush to answer everything. Sometimes it's nice to just take a deep breath, have a think, go over your notes. No one is going to judge you for this, especially if you're a newer DM. Take your time. Obviously, there is a skill to this in and of itself. You don't want to be taking 60 seconds to answer the most basic of questions, but this is something that you will get better with. But just remember, always take a breath whenever you need one. Now that that's out of the way, let's move on to number 8, which is consistency will always beat perfection. What do I mean by that? You will have the one DM who over here has spent literal weeks planning his first session, and the first session might be very good. However, it is not sustainable, and this is why books usually give you a very brief headline of what's happening. Admittedly, these tips are more guided towards homebrew, so you want a world that's more believable. That's why when I am giving you advice on how to structure these NPCs and these villains, it's to just have very simple headlines. Your notes are going to be extremely thin, and your notes are going to be extremely adaptable. If I'm preparing for a 6-hour D&D session, the most, and I mean this, the most I will ever have written down on a piece of paper is maybe a page and a half. And we're talking the most, I can't find it now, but like the most tiny book you've ever seen. You don't need to overthink it. Players will always forgive your mistakes. They will get bored, however, if the world feels manufactured and it doesn't feel like it's alive and it doesn't feel like it's reacting to their decision making and their choices. Here is probably the biggest one on this entire list. I should probably save it for last, but I'm just going to get it out of the way now. Please follow logic. Following logic and getting into the shoes of your characters is what is going to save your skin more times than I can count. And it's probably going to sound very simple and oh, well, no kidding. So hear me out. What would the character do in this specific situation? Or, a better thing, what would realistically happen next? So let's say, again, to rope her back into this conversation, Vatonica is at the bar and the players walk in and they say, I attack, I swing with my axe. What would realistically happen? One DM might just say, well, Vatonica is this big rogue, gunslinging, big katana high elf, she's gonna kill them, and it's a TPK. Realistically, that probably wouldn't happen. Again, do whatever you want, you're the DM, but when we're going back to that believable world, she'd maybe defend herself, or at most, almost given a mortal wound. Something like chop their hand off, or maybe a big laceration up their chest, and then she'd try and defuse the situation, or potentially even hand them over to the authorities and arrest them. A consequence that isn't game ending, but it feels like a legitimate reaction. And again, this is only something that you can improve on with time. Back to the whole, improv isn't magic, it's a skill. There will be times that you suck at doing this, and your players will give you the but you will get better at this over time, and the more familiar you get with these characters and what their visceral reaction would be to certain situations, it'll feel a lot more natural, I promise you. Which brings us to the final kind of cliff note of this video, and I don't want this to come across as being cringe. Again, this is just a one-to-one chat, DM to DM, or future DM, which I hope. Improvisation, as I've said so much in this video, is a skill. It is not something you are just going to wake up and be amazing at. When I first started doing D&D in 2015, I was the most socially anxious person you've ever met in your life, and I credit D&D to actually me getting over this. So the point I'm trying to make is that nobody just starts off being great at improv, even the most extroverted of people that I've ever met. Every session is going to make you better, and you're going to get more comfortable with your decision making. The goal with improv isn't to get better. The goal with improv is to just keep the sessions rolling naturally. And this is a skill that's not only going to make you a better DM, it's going to make you genuinely a better person. It'll make you better in interviews, it's going to make you better in work meetings, it's going to make you better with your in social conversations and keeping the conversation going. It is going to keep you on your toes, and that's why as a DM, if you feel like as a DM you're sat there and you're not really thinking about anything, or you catch yourself drifting, that's when you kind of need to click your fingers and say, right, what's going to happen next? What is this character realistically going to be doing? And how am I going to push this plot forward? To round this all out, of the 10 years that I've been a DM, the biggest complaint I've had from players is the linearity of certain areas. That's why I became a homebrew DM. That's why I started making this big, expansive world. And I found the biggest lesson that I've learned is that players are looking for a DM who's willing to say yes to situations that they think are cool and what's going to keep the adventure moving forward, not lock them in. Let's say they go, I want to just go and find a random fisherman in the town, and you're a very strict DM and you go, no, that's not going to happen. Just go with it. One of those NPCs that you planned, of those 5, they're now a fisherman. They now have a goal of they want to catch the biggest fish in all of Sholem. They want it because they want to win the competition. And if they catch it, they can sell it, and they might share some of that gold with the players to progress the quest. Back to that 3-point rule I was making earlier. Look, you don't need to be a perfect DM. You don't need to be a perfect improv DM. You just need to accept that you're willing to learn and have fun, because it's going to be fun for you and the players moving forward. If you've made it to the end of the video, honestly, thank you so much, and I really hope that going forward as a new DM, or even an intermediate or an advanced DM, any of these have genuinely helped you. Again, this isn't some super formal, ultra edited video. This is just a down-to-earth, casual chat between DMs. I'm not here asking for people to subscribe or like the video, but you're more than welcome. But I'm going to be making more videos like this going forward, which are going to try and help people in various areas of D&D. And the first one I wanted to address was improv, because I think it is one of the biggest biting points for new DMs and really puts them on the back foot. So I really hope you enjoyed the video. Take it easy and enjoy some D&D.